I recently read a quote, and I don't know who actually said it, who wrote it, that said, when you say no to something, you only say no to that one thing at that moment. But when you say yes to something, you're saying no to everything else. So let's talk today why I think you should be saying no more often and what happens once you do. Whether you're a self-taught musician, have a teacher, or you're already a professional, this show is meant to help you with knowledge, mindset, craft, and strategies to improve your overall musicianship so that you can become the best musician you can be regardless of your goals. Welcome to Musicianship Mastery. Hello and welcome. My name is David Lane, and this is episode number 140. And today I want to talk about time management and what happens when you start saying no more often. Now, this is a topic that sparks quite a bit of debate among musicians who are working, professional musicians. No doubt, someone's going to listen to this episode and just vehemently disagree. They're going to be saying, no, this is wrong. You should say yes as often as you can. And other musicians are going to be enthusiastically nodding along with everything I say, that I'm correct, that you should say no more often. And then I know people in between who have said so explicitly on the show that there are seasons for saying yes and there are seasons for saying no. And I do believe to a point that that is correct. A lot of my opinion is informed, like so many others, by my own experience. And in part, a regret. I'm happy with my current life. I'm happy the way I was able to pivot. But I probably delayed finding myself by a good decade, if not more, because of my own philosophy when I was in my 20s of saying yes to so many things. Now let's talk about when I think you should say yes, and under what conditions you should say yes. If you are an aspiring professional musician, but you have absolutely no traction at all, like you have no students as a music teacher, nobody is calling you for any gigs, nobody even knows that you compose music, so you're really at the front door and you just don't have any traction yet, or you have very little, I think that you are absolutely in a season where you should say yes. You should get that professional experience wherever you can and however you can. But you need to try to limit this to maybe about a year. And then your philosophy of saying yes needs to happen after, as I've said on recent episodes, you have chosen that one thing that you are going to try to grow and develop right now. So if you said, I'm going to be a film composer, you're thinking, that is the thing that I am putting the energy into. If you say, I'm going to become a successful, independent teacher, then that is the thing you put your energy into. And whenever you get an opportunity, you ask yourself, does this directly or indirectly possibly help with my efforts to grow this one thing? Let's say that you want to become a pianist who is the pianist to call for any kind of cocktail hour or dinners or banquets, and you also want to grow your studio. Well, which one do you want to do first? You put the other goal on hold while you build up the first. See, when I was in my 20s, I wanted to be a film composer, but I was also trying to grow a teaching studio, and I was also accepting all these piano gigs. And eventually that led to theater, which was a season of my life for a while. But as a result, I didn't really make traction in any of them. I was doing all of that throughout my 20s. And I'm going to say I got to probably the age of 37 or 38 before I had any clarity or any real traction in any one area. And I was in my 40s before I understood what kind of a teacher I am and was able to build my studio with students who are a good fit and make a decent portion of my income from that. Now, might my life had gone a different direction if I had said, I am all in on becoming a film composer when I had the energy and the drive coming right out of graduate school. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know if I would have succeeded to that goal, but the one thing that I would have known for sure, I would have known sooner whether or not that goal was for me. Because when you go all in on one thing and you give it your best, you try all of the strategies, you find mentors to help you with that goal, and you tune out everything else, well, you will find out, I'll say for sure within 2 years, whether or not this is the goal you want to keep pursuing. And then in my case, I could have started pursuing that goal when I was 24 years old. I could have made up my mind 100% one way or the other about film composing when I was 26, or maybe even round up to 27. Instead of getting to my 40s before I realized that I like scoring films, but it is more of a hobby for me. It's not a big part of my professional pie at any point. So I want you to say yes to the things that help your one thing that you're trying to do right now, even if you think it's just in an indirect, small way. But not only do I think you should say no to everything else, I think you should even take some steps that keep you from saying yes to those other things. So a good example, I have a bookcase that's not the one behind me, but there's one that's off camera to this side over here, to my right. And I had a lot of photocopied music from my own sources that were in set lists for me to play, or that I have played in weddings. In fact, specifically, it was a wedding that required violin and cello, and I had all this music arranged, and I had this other folder that was arranged for when I played with 2 violins. And I think the thought in my mind is, I need to keep these around just in case I need it for the next time I take such a gig. And then I had a lot of other books that supported a type of performance gig that I haven't done in a while. But it's hard to say, well, you're not doing it right now, you should get rid of it because you might want to do it again. Well, again, just this week, and by this week, I mean just yesterday, I was looking at my bookshelf and thinking, I really need to clean this shelf. There's 5 shelves in that bookcase, and I wanted to use the bottom one for something completely different. So I wanted to take what was on 5 shelves and get it down to 4. So some of that was going through some books that I didn't need to keep around anymore, but a lot of it was this sheet music that I don't need, because what I haven't said is I made the concrete decision, and it's not a radical decision because I haven't done any weddings since I think 2022, maybe 2021. But I just made a decision, I don't do weddings anymore. Now the exceptions to that be if it's a Saturday evening, because I do teach on Saturday afternoons. And the other exceptions will be a big caveat. It has to be while using the music that I have saved as PDFs, mostly as lead sheets. So if someone asks me to play a wedding and they've got all these requests that I don't have, I'm going to refer them to other pianists. Also, there is someone in this area who acts as a bit of a contractor. They will offer you a gig. They'll tell you when the time is, you can accept or decline, and they provide all the music. I'm on their list. I rarely get called, but I haven't implied that they should call me more than they do. So anyways, I'm just having this really cathartic feeling of just getting all of this out of here, just saying, I don't need things around just in case. I need things that are going to help me go all in with the goals, with the things in my professional life that I have established as being important, and say no to everything else and not regret it at all. Okay, so this is a little bit longer of a portion than I intended, talking about why I think it's important for you to be very selective of how you're saying yes and to say no to more things. But now I want to tell you 8 things that you can expect once you start to say no. So these are things that you make this habit. These are things that you can expect to happen. So the first one is that you'll free up some time. Now, how you spend that time is important. It's easy if you're not careful to spend more time watching TV, watching movies, watching things on YouTube, scrolling on social media. It's actually okay to just take some time to just think, to go for walks, to read. But you also have that time that maybe you could spend it on the thing that you're not saying no to. Maybe you have more time to practice your instrument. Maybe you have more time to actually compose. So the second thing is very related to that, and that is when you start saying no, you'll have the temptation to fill that time with needless things. By all means, take a day every now and then, or part of a day, and just allow yourself to have that extra hour or two. Another quote I heard recently that I can't tell you who the author was, but they said that your most successful people never have bad days. They just have bad moments. And the way that was explained was you have something not go well, but you quickly regroup yourself. You quickly get back on task. And I've been making an effort of that. I have some mornings that I get to lunch and I haven't done anything. So younger me would say, I haven't done anything. The day's a wash. I'll just try again tomorrow. Whereas now I just say, okay, I didn't do anything this morning. That happened. Let's have ourselves lunch, and then let's get to work and get a lot done this afternoon. So the third thing that you'll find when you start saying no more often is that you will be able to fill that time with useful things. Now that may be, once again, practicing your instrument, composing new music, or if you're trying to, say, grow yourself in marketing, whether as a performer or trying to grow your studio, you have time to do that. You have time to work on your website, to work on developing your email list, to post things on social media. The fourth thing that'll probably happen is that certain of your friends right now will either lose interest or unfollow you. Again, I'm talking about social media, but possibly real life as well. So this has happened to me recently in the past year or two. As I've said in previous episodes, I've been phasing out and I have all but quit musical theater. In fact, talking about this whole episode, I have a project coming up that I agreed to months ago. And I've really been for the past several months wishing I had said no. But having said yes, I'll honor that obligation, see it through. But in spite of that one thing that's looming, I have phased myself out, and that is musical theater. I have gone from doing 10 or more productions per year right before COVID to 5 or 6 coming out of COVID to no more than 2 these past couple of years. And if I can possibly avoid it, I'm not doing anything next year. With the exception of the musicals that I'm involved with as an arranger that I'm helping to develop. But I'm talking about just participating in local productions as a music director or as a keyboardist or as a conductor. I've really enjoyed, I've really appreciated my experiences with that, but it does not fit me at all with what I'm trying to do right now. And as a result, a lot of friends that I met through theater, I would say a good chunk of them, don't engage with me at all anymore. And yes, to a point, that doesn't feel very good, but at the same time, you kind of accept that that's just how that goes. So fifth thing that might happen, the fifth and sixth are kind of related to the fourth. This fifth thing is that some bridges may be burned. When you say no to something often enough, people will stop calling. I mean, I've said no to enough weddings. That's a pretty easy decision for me to make as far as getting rid of wedding music because nobody really calls me. As soon as I announced that I was doing less with musical theater, I guess I should say this. Before I announced that I was semi-retiring from musical theater that became more of a hardcore retirement, I was saying no probably an average of once a month or once every other month to an offer to be a music director for some local production. And having said no enough, and having kind of emphasized that point on social media, on my personal page, hardly anybody calls me anymore, or emails or texts, and asks me to be a music director because they assume that that's just a waste of their time. So if I changed my mind about this, I would have some work to do. I would have to build up that thing again. Now, it shouldn't take me too long if I wanted to do that. It's much easier to rebuild something, to build it back up the second time than it was the first time. But this is a thing. If you start saying no to certain types of gigs, eventually the people offering those gigs will stop calling. On the other hand, and this is number 6, stronger bridges will be made. As soon as I made more of an emphasis of the type of teacher that I want to be, with a big part of that being that I teach piano to beginning and intermediate adults. And I started making it known that this was a type of student that I was looking for. And sure enough, I get more calls than I can take because I'm booked from that type of student who got my name from someone who referred me to them. So you will build stronger bridges as you're saying yes to fewer things. And the 7th is that you get to do more focus on what matters the most. So if you said yes to becoming a film composer, or you said yes to becoming a full-time orchestral musician, by saying no to all the other things that don't support that, you find the time to get more practice in, or to do more networking, or whatever is the missing ingredient for you achieving that goal. And then the final thing that I'll say is that when you say no more often, you will get better at fewer things and therefore increasing your value in those things. Now, when you reach a point, as I've said before, you can choose to now try something else. You don't have to pick something you're going to do for the rest of your life. I won't say this too often, but I'll say this right here for anyone still listening to this episode. I don't have a plan to keep this podcast going for the rest of my life. This is episode 140. I have a commitment to do one episode a week through episode 200. So unless something unforeseen happens, there are 60 more episodes coming on this podcast. Sometime prior to episode 200, probably around the time I start releasing episodes 180, 185, somewhere around there, I'm going to reevaluate where I am with this podcast and whether or not I want to extend that goal to 250, or whether or not I want to do less with it or call it a day. I don't know what's going to happen. Episode 200, if I'm calculating correctly, will come out almost at the very end of 2026. So we're talking about more than a year away. Actually, it may be more like early 2027. So again, we've got a ways to go before we get there. But there are 2 things that are very likely to happen when I get to that point. Either I'm going to see the information that I'm looking for, to see that the podcast is growing, that it's being successful, that it's where I want to be, and I'm going to do even more to grow it. I'm going to make it bigger and better after episode 200. Or I'm going to see evidence that it's not growing, and then I'm going to congratulate myself for having 200 episodes of what I think is valuable information for musicians who want to improve their musicianship. And then I'm going to put that energy, take it away from the podcast and put it elsewhere. Now, what that energy would do, I've already decided that. It's not going to be for something brand new. It's going to go to growing one of the other hats that I have, whether it's my YouTube videos that I make specifically for pianists and composers, or whether it's being a teacher and finding ways to grow that, or whether or not it's being a composer and an arranger. So that's going to wrap up today. I hope that you will find value yourself when you start to say no. If you have any thoughts about this episode that you'd like to share, feel free to reach out to me at davidlanemusic.com and leave a message. And by the way, if you want to say no to more things as a teacher, such as sending out invoices and going back and forth on when or when would not be a good time to teach a lesson, I encourage you to check out Fonz. You can do that for free, and you can use the link at the bottom of my show notes. And that's going to wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be back with you again next week.